Hello, it's Helen Godden. Welcome back, magicians. Yes, it's May. It's time for our next block, and this time it's called Late Night Bloomer, and it features our froggy friend with some icky sticky lime green, and we're going to do some blending work with our indigo. He's got some little bobbly toes there, so it's going to be a little bit intricate, and he's talking to a dragonfly friend, which of course is my personal symbol. So get your fine brushes out, lots of blending and lots of detail work in this one. So let's get painting with our Late Night Bloomer with Mr. Frog. So I've jumped on into my icky sticky lime green. Now if you haven't got that lime green, you're going to use your green, the halo blue gold, and mix some brass into it and maybe some white, and that's going to give you a lime green colour. Now a lot of us have found over the time that with these really pale colours such as the lime green, sometimes it needs a second coat. So as this is just about dry, you might require just to go over it again to give it a bit more solid colour behind it. But the black gaps are quite important here to make that leg in front of the body, etc. So I have got my smallest brush on hand and trying to get those lines nice and smooth and flowing. Squeezing down into his little fat toes and trying to make those shapes look quite appealing. Now you can see I actually drew those water lines right the way across his leg. That's one way to make sure that your lines link up with each other, knowing that we're just going to paint over it anyway. Same as the reed. You can see the reed I've drawn over the top of the pond lines. Just make sure all those lines link up. So now I've got the halo blue gold, and I'm going in just to give it that bit of tonal variation anywhere that needs to sit behind something else. I'm just darkening it that little bit, smoothing it out with a bit more of the lime green. Just that teeny bit of variation makes him quite real hanging on to that reed. He's got sunset gold on his tummy with a little bit of the rose gold, blending those two together. Now, of course, reeds are green, so we don't really want green next to green. So I've jumped into the different colour there. I've got the old brass, which is that khaki colour, which will sit behind his leg and, you know, help keep him in the foreground the most. So we're doing that on both the reeds. Swapping to that little brush to get into those teeny little areas. Literally just tickling in those areas with the point of that brush. If you find some of those little areas just too small to get your brush into, you could just leave those little areas black, just to really show off their little fat feet. A little bit of indigo there to darken it, and you can see I've just pushed it into those little areas. Again, see how it gives the shadow? We've got the halo blue gold for the lily pad. I did look it up, and there is a lily that blooms at night time. So before anyone jumps on the bandwagon and says, no, 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 no. So this is a late night bloomer. And we've got our little dragonfly in there, and it's going to be rather a pretty one. So this is where your black gaps are going to be very important around his foot there, or else the green and the green is going to blend together. So watch your black gaps there, Helen. Bit like when I was in London and we got on the train and they keep saying, mind the gap, mind the gap. I kept thinking of our black gaps the whole time. Now that indigo is darkening it again just to give us the texture of that lily pad. And then jumping into the watery pond area with our pearl blue. So you can see how I'm using the flat side of that brush to get into those little areas. And those gaps we're leaving are virtually the ripples, etc. on the pond. So in the foreground, the water does curve around the lily pad, but then towards the back, as the distance comes in, we just have those horizontal lines as it moves towards the horizon. That helps, gives us a feeling of depth. Even in this very small piece, we've got a little bit of depth in that pond. So we've just been looking and watching this painting as I'm doing it here, and just realising that if I hadn't put those horizontal lines in the background there, that would end up being a huge slab of blue that would really push forward towards your eye and towards the viewer. By having those black gaps in it to give the illusion of the depth, it's actually given us, yeah, the illusion of depth and the texture that's needed in that otherwise blank area. So now for the lily, I've cleaned off that brush and I'm jumping into the rose gold. So if you weren't a member of our Curiouser and Curiouser, you might not have met Rose Gold before. She was a new colour that came in for our Curiouser and Curiouser block of the month because it is a lovely tone of Caucasian skin colour. Adding a little bit of white to it really does give us a nice skin tone. So it's a useful one, but it's going to give us a very pretty look there for our lily, for our bloom. And you can see I've lost some of my black gaps there, but I'm pretty sure I'll find them soon. There we go, so putting down that white and then putting the rose gold back on top, it just lifts that colour and really makes it look very delicate, just as a lily is. Now I jumped in there with a little bit of black, I think, just to give myself a centre, and then the brass on the edge of my brush, giving us just a few of those stamens in there. I think that one, when it comes to the stitching, I think I'll find some of those edges that I have lost. Bit of crimson on the body of the dragonfly, and then the crimson, teeny bit of crimson with the white gives us that pale pink colour, which isn't the same pink as the lily, so that's nice. So in the background there, I started with the halo violet gold and pretty promptly changed my mind. There we go, we've jumped into the burgundy, and that's going to look a lot better for the background. That's the beauty of these paints too, is you can change your mind and just paint over the top of something. There you go, it's gone. Just like that. A little bit of tickling on the lily there with the burgundy that was left on my brush, just the teeny highlights. I've then grabbed some russet for his eyeball and a little bit more on his belly, and then blending that back in because it's already dried, so I'm blending that back in with the brass. And just touching up again with that Icky Sticky Lime Green, you can see how that just brings it together a bit more. It does need 2 coats for something that pale. And again, here's that mix just to remind you, if you haven't got your Icky Sticky Lime Green, it's a mix of that halo blue gold with some brass with the white to lighten it. I used the same mix for the stem of the lily, and now I've got that black on my brush and using the really fine edge of the brush and finding those gaps again and defining those petals. And then the end of the paintbrush gives me the eyeball for the froggy. Otherwise you could do it with the Sharpie, of course. There we go, a bit of touching up with the rose gold again. And the dot, ta-da! A little bit of highlighting there, just through the middle, like some moonshine, with the pearl white on the blue. And that's a little bit of the pearl white on the frog, just to get some shiny patches, because of course, you know, frogs are wet and shiny. And there we have it. Looking pretty good, our late night bloomer. We'll let that dry, and I'll see you very soon in the sewing room.